Yeah, the finished live stream is going to be immaculate, just like the vibes. Apparently, someone decided to call me now, and it's ringing in my head. All right, fantastic. And I knew that was going to happen. I think I was late to the game, first of all. I didn't know.
This is early innings.
I felt like I was late because there seemed to be some sort of incentive to come early, to test out the product, the Creator Fund. And I feel like the Creator Fund seems to be kind of the mechanism by which we can get people on early to test a product or align incentives between, in this case, a creator and their community of collectors, or just generally a community at large. Welcome back to the Crypto Consumer Chronicles, a podcast of Crypto Sapiens. We meet here every week to define and demystify consumer crypto with the people who are building it. Make sure to sign up to our newsletter and become a member by minting our subscriber NFT on Hypersub. You can get all the details on cryptosapiens.xyz. For getting started, I also want to thank the generous supporters that help us do what we do: Mosaic Labs, the Optimism Collective, and Bankless DAO. Cool. Today we're talking to Brian of Boost, aka RabbitHole. I don't know. Let's figure that one out too, because that's where I first met you. So I really want to know what that evolution looks like. So to get started, why don't you just give a brief introduction, and then definitely touch on RabbitHole, and then how Boost came to be.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm Brian. I'm the CEO and founder of Boost, previously known RabbitHole. So a lot of people might have known Boost as this previous evolution called RabbitHole, which was started in 2020. So at the time when RabbitHole started, the whole premise was, how do we get tokens in the hands of actual users of protocols, since most users were still on centralized exchanges at the time, not actually using crypto apps. And as we were building that product, we actually realized that there's much bigger opportunity for a lot of these protocols and creators to go direct to users. So actually using smart contracts to distribute incentives directly without sort of a middleman involved of like an application or a platform, which RabbitHole was at the time. And so as we built up the protocol, it didn't really make sense to have this application be known as the front-facing thing. So we wanted to actually go at the protocol level to the application level. And so we need to do a rebrand to actually demonstrate, hey, this is a protocol-first approach and no longer an app, where anyone can build a front-end client like a Warpcast on top of it. But you could think of RabbitHole as like the Warpcast to the actual Boost protocol itself, right? And we're also expanding to new types of clients for Boost, such as Boost Inbox, and there are others coming down the line focused on very specific types of actions, which we can dive into. But we kind of think of ourselves in a very similar model as Farcaster, which is many different clients in the Boost ecosystem, all that are kind of catered to different audiences depending on what type of actions they actually want to do inside of Boost.
Yeah, that's great. And, it's funny you mentioned the whole protocol-client relationship, because we had Johnny, a.k.a. nonlinear.eth, on the pod. He was actually our first guest for this specific series, and he made a point to talk about how, I don't know if it's fair to say at this point, or it always has been, but it's important for anyone who's developing a protocol to also consider developing the client. There is a very good reason and strong incentives to do that. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've the only reason we've actually built the protocol was because we were dogfooding the application ourselves in a lot of ways and kind of understood the friction points. And when we built the protocol, it wasn't meant of like, hey, we want to be decentralized, but it was more so, how do we make this process that we're already doing just more automated and move it on chain? So it was like, how do we have smart contracts just make that much easier, and then building more incrementally to a decentralized protocol over time.
Okay, so let's talk about Boost specifically, right? Because I guess I understood Boost to be one thing, and then you helped to clarify, hey, it's not just a creator mint thing, but there's a lot more there. Maybe unpack it from the creator mint perspective first, and like what you're doing with the Creator Fund, and then open it up more broadly to what you envision it to become.
Boost, at its core in Boost Inbox, which is the Mint client, is making it really easy for creators to boost specific NFTs, right? And so if they want to promote their NFTs, whether it's, podcast NFTs or your artworks across these different projects, you can put an incentive to collectors behind it we can potentially start collecting your work and sort of bootstrap and get a couple of collectors. So then it appears on other interfaces like mint.fun and interface and kind of this on-chain social graph that kind of starts picking these things up, right? And so this is kind of opening a whole new on-chain distribution channel where now you can start promoting your work and get the hands into more collectors and even do very specific targeting where you can use allow list and boost to actually target specific collectors based off their different attributes. So that's what it looks like from the creator perspective. What we're doing with the creator fund is saying, hey, we have a whole bunch of retro PGF that we've earned in the past. And we want to align our incentives with Optimism retro PGF in the future as well. They're in round 4 right now. That's specifically for builders. We want to figure out how can we actually use these incentives that we're getting from retro PGF and align our incentives with the collective at large. And so that really, what that really means is let's get these tokens in the hands of actual creators that are generating value to the underlying superchain, and then just make that creator fund larger and larger as Boost actually gets more retro PGF in the future. That will definitely be a type of campaign that we do continuously over a period of time. We'll always be tweaking it to make sure and figure out how we can continuously support creators getting started on Boost, because that's always one of the biggest problems is creators don't have huge chunk of funds set aside to go test and experiment things with, because they're trying to figure out how to actually put our money, how do we actually make money revenue on chain. It's still a very nascent thing that most people are trying to understand and how to do. And the creator fund is definitely, okay, here's actually a way to start experimenting with this stuff, figure out this is a new type of way of thinking about on-chain distribution. So that's what we've been up to with the creator fund.
Yeah, no, that's great. In fact, I do want to touch on retro PGF and your success there, but I don't want to get distracted from the second part of that original question, which was beyond being a mechanism for creators to incentivize mints and go viral, which another thing I want to come back to. What else do you imagine Boost to become beyond this mechanism for creators?
So the way we built Boost is really a mechanism where any on-chain action can be incentivized, right? And so if you actually go and deploy a Boost today, we have 89 different projects that you can actually deploy a Boost for with their different actions. So it's not just mints that you can deploy a Boost for. It's actually things like bridging and swapping and things like reposting and follows, right? So any on-chain action that can actually be defined by a smart contract function can actually be created from a Boost itself, right? And that opens up a whole nother use cases that we've seen already that have been happening in RabbitHole, which is things like maybe you're a new L3 or L2 launching and you want to incentivize people to bridge to your network. Maybe that you're a new meme coin launching and you want people to swap to your token. Maybe you are a delegate in Optimism or Arbitrum and you want to incentivize someone to delegate to your address, right? So there are all these types of use cases that can be Boost itself. And we've kind of created this framework where anyone can define what that action they want to actually incentivize and create that in a very human readable structure, right? And so what the protocol basically looks like is we basically just have a way to define human readable actions in a very standardized format and then match that to different contract functions for any individual to actually start to incentivize. So Mint was definitely one of the biggest use cases that we've seen and kind of went full deep into kind of create this Mint experience. You can imagine other types of experience in the future where if anyone wants to actually incentivize an action to be happened, then it can just use Boost for that. We've actually started to see a lot of protocols starting to use Boost as an alternative ways of distributing tokens rather than airdrops as well. So they're saying, hey, we don't want to do the normal airdrop method. We want to actually do it in a more proactive basis. So how can we start to acquire and engage users in sort of this Boost type capacity? So we're starting to see that as well.
Yeah, I think there's something there to really dig into, and I'm trying to figure it out. I know one thing that when you talked about airdrops, that just immediately was buzzing in my head was points, right? I think that's been like a system that has been implemented for some time, and it sometimes works. It doesn't always, I would say. It's probably more rare when a point system is effective for airdrops. Do you imagine a world in which a lot of these future airdrops, especially let's talk about like L2s, L3s, L4s, who knows, could they use these more gamified systems, I guess, like what Boost would provide in lieu of points? Or maybe with points in some way?
I think the reason a lot of the points really came to become as a meta was to drive attention for products before committing to an actual token itself. So it was sort of this like regulatory arbitrage to draw attention and just minimize your CAC as low as possible without actually giving out money in some capacity. We're already starting to see that kind of fade away a little bit because it was kind of overdone and users are not getting the value that they're seeing from actually creating those points products. However, there definitely is still a need to have this reputation basis for actually completing things that doesn't lead to financial value. But in that world, it's not actually, financial primitive in that standpoint. We have seen a lot of these L3s using Boost and starting to think about it in terms of how can we actually start having a token that actually starts to incentivize a different activity that feels fundamentally like points because the cost to transact is so cheap at a millionth of a penny, right? Where it does feel like loyalty points. You definitely feel that way when you're using something like Onchain. Boost also is working on on-chain points standard, which is just going to be a soulbound ERC20, where that can then be used inside of the protocol. Because we have gotten that request from others as well. And that way you can really just start creating your points and just start playing around with incentivizing different behavior. It's up to you if you want to make that transferable at some point in the future. But it's definitely a request that we've seen from different communities so far.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting kind of evolution of in my case, I'm going to call it the creator stack. Others might call it something different. But as a creator, I've seen where there have been these disconnected systems that take a lot of effort to manually and sometimes not even fully integrate, but at least get data from all of these different sources and make sense of them through some sort of like non-crypto native solution like an Excel spreadsheet. Whereas more recently, I've seen a more integrated approach where a lot of these different tools are playing nice, and a lot of it because it's on chain, so there's this like natural occurring synergy, I suppose you can say, based on the fact that on-chain data can be easily called and then used within another product. And then now it sounds like there's maybe this more even more so integrated system where something like Boost can say, hey, look, these are all the systems that we've seen are important to you. We want to build them in. Sure, we'll still be able to like recognize all of these other data points, but you can start using us for rewards. You can use us for reputation. You can use us for point systems. That's really cool. That's very impressive.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it took us a while from just working RabbitHole to kind of, see this evolution. But it definitely lined up nicely in this low cost fee environment, which was really the big unlock that I would say is post 4844 when fees started to 1 cent. People just started thinking about token distribution rewards very differently than when Ethereum mainnet was around. It's just it's a completely new way of thinking about tokens, and even the NFT space. Kind of felt that whole open edition craze. Post 4844 as well. So. It's been interesting to see how just fee dynamics have changed the space so much over the past few months.
I remember the days when I was spending thousands of dollars just to be able to do things on chain.
That's right.
It was very expensive to be a degen then. It's definitely more cost effective now if you wanted to be a degen. So let's go back to this idea of like Boost as a creator mechanism or tool that they can use, aka I can use, to be able to better align my collectors to, I guess, perform some on-chain actions that are beneficial or supportive of the work that I do. Beyond going to Inbox and minting, this content or these NFTs on chain, what are some of the things that you think people are doing right? And what are some of the things that you're like, well, these are things that I would like people to do better? And I talk about this specifically thinking of two people, Koopa Troopa and Levy, or Adam Levy, aka Levy.eth. These people I think are doing really good at going viral. So I don't want to lead the question too much because I certainly could go further into this. What do you think people are doing right, and what do you think people can do better?
So here's what I think Cooper and Adam have figured out. I think they figured out that a lot of these NFT platforms and other social interfaces built on these NFT platforms have trending pages that are the main sources of discovery for high quality mints. They have figured out that if you actually have a certain number of mints, you will get on the trending pages, and that will actually lead to organic mints, right? And so they're basically having positive ROI in terms of running their boosts. They're actually making money from running boosts. And a large part of that is because they actually are doing the math on what it actually costs to kind of get on these pages to get this wider distribution. So then you reach a kind of a broader audience. So that's like the first thing they really figured out. I think the second thing they figured out is that with Boost, you can use any single token that you want to actually create the boost, right? And there's a lot of these, call them scene coins, meme coins, social tokens, whatever you want to call them, that are looking to get their tokens in the hands of quality collectors and align themselves with quality creators. And so they're giving out tokens to these creators and saying, hey, we would love your collectors to also receive some of our token because we just want to expand the number of token holders that we have, right? So they figured out, well, we can actually get our token, we can work with these other creators and basically figure out what a new sponsor really looks like in some capacity and then run Boost without itself. I think the third thing they figured out is really figuring out the Boost marketplace dynamics. And so the interesting thing about Boost is that this is a classic like order book type scenario, right? So you have that there are users that are completing Boost and discovering Boost, and then there are Boost creators that are pricing Boost, right? When there's a high amount of supply, particularly because the creator fund, might not be enough demand, in which pricing Boost is actually high. The reward to complete a Boost is actually higher, right? In some regard. So understanding those dynamics as someone that's creating Boost actually affects, right, the cost and the ROI of some sorts, right? The last thing I'll say is Dune is such a powerful tool for Boost as well. There's a bunch of people like C-Launch that is creating these very rich visual dashboards for creators to actually see their results. So you actually don't need to do the work in creating spreadsheets as a creator. No creator wants to go and do the spreadsheet math themselves, right? There's actually a lot of templates in Dune where you could just plug in your address and see all the results of all the boosts that you've run, right? And so understanding that there's a whole toolkit available as a creator to actually see those results is a really powerful unlock that they've seen. I think the one thing that is really unexplored right now for a lot of creators is the ability to have your own Boost inbox. Cooper actually has his own right now, so being able to have all the boosts kind of in one place with his own branding as well. The way the Boost protocol works is that there's a 5% fee to the front end that actually is facilitating the boost, which drives actually a distribution to multiple aspects. So even if you share out a boost on Farcaster, the person who shares it out with the boost gets a 5% fee. If you host the front end yourself as a creator and you're driving boost yourself, you can basically take that 5% fee, right? And actually your margins become a bit cheaper in the end as well, right? Because you're not paying the 5% fee to another front end. And you can split that to multiple people as well. And so I think there's like another meta to be unlocked for creators if they really want to optimize their boost spend on another level by actually, thinking about, well, what is my spend to these different protocols that I'm actually interacting with. So in Zora, like there's of course the Zora protocol reward. There's also Boost protocol fees attached to it as well. And then there's the affiliate fees. So understanding those cost structures to get the best results, I think is like kind of the ultimate boss, on one hand to figure out how to optimize this most efficiently. So that's where I think a lot of this meta goes is figuring out how do we actually get the best results based off of the right distribution that we're trying to achieve as a creator.
Yeah, there's a few things there that I definitely want to come back to, and certainly I think I could do better. Like, so when I talk about like what are people doing right and what can people do better, I have a very clear idea of who's doing things right, and I know which bucket I fit into. So it's a very selfish question because I'm like, what can I do better? Obviously, using Boost is a good start, but being a little bit more thoughtful. I love this whole idea of like data analytics as a way to like improve your incentives to maximize, I guess the profit that you could potentially make, the revenue you can generate using Boost. I think that is something that is worth considering. You mentioned something early that I think fits nicely into this, and you were talking about the social graph, right? That just naturally occurs because a lot of these things are on chain. What are some of the things that you're seeing develop now with Boost that, and I think you might have already touched on it, can be leveraged for creators or other platforms to build on?
So I think the most powerful thing that we've seen so far is the crossover between Farcaster and Boost. So because the Farcaster dataset is fully open and public, you can actually do a crossover between who are the users that are collecting my Boost, and also what is their Farcaster handles, what time of day are they active on Farcaster, what channels do they engage in, do they follow me on Farcaster. You can basically cross-reference a lot of this data and start to understand, are these bots who completing it? Are these someone else, right? Are these people that engage with me on other platforms as well? Because all of that data is open, you can really start to understand your audience. And once you do that, once you start building a top of funnel, then you can start doing, further down the funnel and start to engage these collectors and these fans to a whole nother different level, right? And start to use Boost in that capacity as well. So not just say, hey, I'm going to run a public Boost and try to attract a wide audience, but say, I'm going to create a very targeted Boost to these specific individuals who have interacted with me on Farcaster, follow me on Farcaster, maybe putting additional allow list criteria on top of it and targeting them even with maybe a higher reward or a new type of action to engage them with. Those are the types of things. I think then in terms of just like, I think there's a whole audience builder type of platform that can be built on top of Boost itself that we just don't have functionality to build ourselves. But I would imagine that there is going to be this whole insights and allow list builder stack, right, that starts to build on top of Boost as new ways to actually engage the audience and see these results, where it's not just a bunch of Dune dashboards, but now very sophisticated ways where creators can understand these results. So I think that's likely how it's going to evolve over the next 6 to 12 months or so.
These insights, are you planning on building those on Boost, or are you asking people to go build something on Dune or even Bello, by the way, since we've been talking about Atom?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, this is all the above. I think for us, we're very much focused on the protocol in the underlying infrastructure, but taking a very simple approach to Farcaster here, where anyone can build a different type of client on top, whether it's on the supply side focused to creators, or whether it's users that want to have a new client for actually completing these boosts. And having a built-in business model actually to make it easy to create these clients as well. It's kind of a big focus.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, I definitely like this idea of just like visualizing your collectors, visualizing this entire marketplace through the social protocol that is Farcaster. I mean, I would love to hear your thoughts because, I mean, you've been in this space for some time. You've been a founder and a developer in this space for some time. Did you see Farcaster coming? And now that it's here, where's it going?
Great question. There's been a lot of attempts at decentralized social over the last, say, 6-7 years, right? Even I'd say like Steemit was probably one of the early examples of crypto social back 2017. Then there was things like Cent as well, who've tried something similar. And then there was kind of this like gap. No one really tried it afterwards. I mean, there was the Bitcoin one. I'm blanking on the name. That was like pretty popular from these decentralized social people, where you buy your friends. You think you know what I'm talking about?
Nostr.
It was something like that. And then when Farcaster came, I think the thing that they got right was really focusing on seeding builders as much as possible, right? And Dan and Varun's whole thing was, in order for this to be successful, we need to have a builder community, because the builder community is going to want to build on top of other builders, right? Where then it feels like this very composable social graph, right? So they built Farcaster as very much like, how can we get this community of builders together, and then for it to kind of catch fire for other people to build these projects on top. So even though that Farcaster doesn't have like a built-in business model to it, but it has a community of builders that are all kind of trying to help each other in some capacity. And that was really the powerful unlock that kind of created this ecosystem. Because now monetization, of course, is now the big thing a lot of people in the Farcast ecosystem are trying to figure out. But really, I think the main thing that Farcaster did unlock was this on-chain social graph, where now anyone, in a very kind of legitimate capacity, anyone can see, okay, because you follow me on Farcaster, you can apply the same social graph across a variety of applications and provide the best user experience to those users. So even something we're doing on the Boost side is integrating Farcaster across our entire stack, so that when a user connects their Farcaster handle to Boost, everything kind of populates in terms of, showing Boost from people you follow, populating a list of all people who created a Boost with their Farcaster handles if they have it connected, and just other things, just to create that much better experience where it feels like very familiar, where people you've actually seen. And that is the only kind of experience you can build with an on-chain social graph for playing Farcaster. So I'm definitely very excited about it. We're definitely excited about building deeper into the Farcaster stack, and I think it's going to be here to stay for a long period of time.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I think also tools like Frames change the way that developers and consumers could use decentralized social. I hadn't before seen anything that works so seamlessly, and abstracted away a lot of the things that I think get in the way of crypto being successful, which is something that is just very technical, requires wallets and private keys.
Definitely, yeah. Frames was a huge unlock for us as well. Just being able to have Boost live inside of the social feed without leaving the feed itself was, something we dreamed about since we saw the launch of Frames and finally launched it last week. Still kind of some glitches in it, but I think over the long term, I think as those issues kind of pan out, I think Frames is going to be one of the core mechanisms that a lot of Farcaster builders use an ecosystem to actually start engaging users. So definitely excited about keeping following on with Frames.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're excited about personally, or, with what Boost is doing and some of the integrations that you think that you can add in the near future? I mean, I'm sure, like you said, this is something that is constantly evolving, and especially as you're continuing to develop, or should I say, continue to get rewards or incentives from Optimism themselves, there might be additional funds. Like, what are some of the things that you're planning or would like to see, if there isn't anything on the books yet?
Yeah, so I think I'd say there's like three different categories here of things that I'm really excited for. I think the first one is Boost as a core primitive for other protocols as well. So more building things like if this happens, then that. So for example, like if a mint happens on Zora, then automatically create a Boost for it, right? So you don't actually have to manually create a Boost as a user. It's just kind of like programmed into the contract itself, where it's a kind of just leveraging composability on that instance. The second one I would say is we're working on our V2 of the protocol, which has variable rewards and auction rewards. So being able to price Boost a lot more effectively. V2 of the protocol also has the ability to put action validation on chain, which basically means that you can define any action much easier. So not just the actions that we have at our registry, but you want to bring your own contract to it, and just maybe your new app wants to start Bootstrap adoption. That will be much easier as well. So starting to put in a lot of our infrastructure on chain just to make it easier to run new Boost for new types of contracts, especially the new developers. You don't have to like build up a following on Twitter to kind of get all the distribution. So I'd say those are kind of the two biggest. I think the third is we have a lot of new integrations coming with on-chain gaming as well. So a lot of these new games are actually starting to build on chain, especially in the Redstone ecosystem. They're looking at new ways of getting distribution as well. And so leveraging Boost as a means of actually getting players to do things inside of the game and using it part of gameplay loop itself is something that we're already starting to see from a bunch of developers. So I think we'll continue to kind of tap into each of those different areas. So something we're definitely excited about, aside from the creator stack, is all on-chain gaming, how it can be used with Boost.
Yeah, I know back when I was building a credentialing platform, we also called it reputation platform. There was this idea, and I think still there is an idea of like how credentials or badges can be built for on-chain gaming communities that are usable within the game, but also could then be taken from one game to another. I think that's definitely just a huge opportunity for anyone building the space like you are. I guess, what are some of the things we could learn from traditional Web 2 games? Not Web 2, but traditional games that we can think about as we develop these tools for Web 3 or on-chain games?
Yeah, well, I think to your first point, the reputation layer of crypto, I think, is still really in its early stages, right? It's much more advantageous, as you can say, to create new addresses rather than use the same address, right? Is what we've seen with the whole airdrop farming craze. And I don't think that will always be true. I think your transaction history is really your best form of your like on-chain resume of sorts. And I think we'll see at the end game, I don't really know when that is, of using the same address, compiling all of your digital identity and your transaction activity, where your reputation really starts to matter, and using that as part of getting eligible for specific boosts, especially in the future. I just don't think we're at that point right now, because we're still in the phase of like, how do we get as many transactions or how many mints or how many whatever. It's very quantitative in the current state. I think in terms of your question, in terms of like what can Web3 gaming learn from Web2, is they have a really big focus on user acquisition in the Web2 world. So that they think of like app installs and what is our cost per user, and how do we have retention, all the monetization efforts that go into the in-game economy, where they have like hire economists to figure out how the game economy looks like. That probably is what some form of like token mechanism design looks like at some point in the future, is leveraging a lot of the same skill sets of creating this game economy where you're trying to kind of pull these different levers, but doing it in a way where the community can kind of take it over a period of time rather than like kind of like a core team, figuring out the balancing system. We kind of already see this in like the degen world, where it's like, there's a meta, you have like your tipping occurring, and then like the meta changes because people try to game the system. Very similar to games in Web 2, where you have like a meta, people figure out the meta, and then like the game developers say, okay, this is getting unbalanced, we need to change it in one form or another. So I think that's a really interesting part of Web3 is that in Web3 games is like the meta is defined by the players actually creating the game. There is no like central entity to say like, hey, we can change like the meta in some capacity. It's really the players figuring out new ways of building things on top of it that kind of can change those dynamics.
There was one thing you mentioned that just totally resonated with me, because this is a problem I constantly find myself in, and that is, I start a new wallet, and barely pseudonymous. I'm not trying to say that I'm an anon here, far from it. I start a new wallet, and I'm like, okay, this is gonna be my burner wallet, because if anything happens, I'm okay with it losing money. Being, crypto what it is, suddenly things that I considered trash become treasure. And I was like, oh, well, now this can't be my burner wallet, because now there is value in this. So I'm going to start a new wallet, and whatever happens here doesn't matter. And the same thing happens over and over. So this whole idea that we can build reputation on identities that are fluctuating might be the wrong word, but just they're never constant, is really hard. So I really would love to see a future where there's an opportunity to create this like aggregate reputation based on multiple identities, right? Or what we choose to reveal to others. So I don't know if you've given that thought personally. I know that 4 years ago, by the way, just to give context to this question, I had you on Clubhouse, and we talked about decentralized identity then. Right. So there might be some resonance with what was shared at that point in time too.
Yeah. It is interesting, because a lot of the decentralized identity on-chain reputation talks then was a bit early, but still relevant to a lot of things today in terms of how people thought about DIDs at the time. specifically was like kind of one of the big unlocks. But DIDs was never really a construct that the crypto ecosystem really took hold of, because there's really never a reason to get behind DIDs. But I think once crypto does move to this very world where your reputation does matter, and it gives you access to new specific things because of mechanisms like Boost or whatever that actually give you instant opportunities, then reputation starts to matter. And I think you would agree with this, and I'm curious what you think, but reputation was always this like thing that people knew was going to matter eventually, but never had like a problem to latch onto. So it felt a little bit early in some cases, but like it is kind of the end game of all this is having this aggregate identity of exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, I remember when I brought you on Clubhouse, it was my early days of thinking about decentralized identity, and I figured starting a club that talked about DIDs and VCs and reputation was a cheat code for me to get the best education from the smartest people I knew. And so I was so glad that you came on, and so many other friends that also joined and taught me so much. Since then, I've continued to think about that problem a lot. And that's my thought as it stands. I agree with you. I think that there never really was a use case where there was a need to worry about your reputation. In fact, it was probably better to create things from scratch, to try to be as pseudonymous and keep things very separate. But I think we're getting to a point where reputation is incredibly valuable. And one of these examples have been airdrops recently, where it would be good to know if the people that I'm rewarding are A, real people, B, people who create value, rather than people that are just extracting value from an ecosystem. And I think a reputation can provide us with at least a window into the soul of the people who use these products. I do think that DIDs still are too early, in the fact that for most builders, it isn't the go-to standard that they want to work with. They like to work with things that are more crypto native, right? Not saying that there is no cryptographic proof associated to the way that DIDs and VCs work. It's just not familiar to a lot of people. And so there needs to be a bridge that allows people to work with them in ways that are more familiar.
Yeah, no, totally agree. It's definitely on the same page there.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I mean, as we're rounding out the hour, and I just want to be respecting your time here too. Anything firstly that you think we missed that you're like, oh, we want to make sure we touch on this and what we're doing at Boost or otherwise?
I think we covered the main pieces. I think the one thing maybe just to refocus on is the way that we're building Boost is the end game to be a decentralized protocol, right? And so we really want to make sure that the fee structure that we have in place aligns incentives between all the different parties. So whether that's the person providing the funds for the Boost, between the person actually creating the Boost itself, right? Those things can be separate, and the actual participant who completes the Boost, right? All three need to be incentivized as well for driving value back to the actual token itself or the underlying action, right? And so that is how we've built the system, is how can we create this protocol for alignment across these different pieces, right? And so that's kind of how we think about the end game for a lot of what we're building, is really creating this like incentive alignment stack. So how can we get tokens in the hands of the right participants, which is really what we started RabbitHole for originally 4 years ago.
Rad. Well, honestly, this has been a really fun chat. I'm glad we were able to get you on here on the pod. Let's make sure that we get this boosted before the end of the week.
Yeah, for sure.
Where can people go and learn more?
Yeah, so you can read more about Boost at Boost.xyz, Boost_XYZ on Twitter, and Boost.xyz on Farcaster as well.
Farcaster is the only place that matters.
Right.
A lot of really good conversations happening there. All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Brian. And until next time, check out Boost and check us out on Farcaster as well, Crypto Sapiens. Yeah, that's all it is.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for having me, Humpty. Take care.